Ever feel like you've squeezed every last drop from the '70s cult movie Grape? Think again. Sin Explorers. We're firing up the midnight projector for 16 renegade reels, so strange, so wondrous, they'll send your eyeballs on a psychedelic pilgrimage. Grab your popcorn, silence your square friends, and let's carve a neon-lit trail through cinema's wild frontier. Ready? El Toppo, 1970. Alejandro Jodorowsky's desert fever dream erupts like a mystical gunshot at dawn. Picture a lone, black-clad gunfighter, played by Jodorowsky himself, journeying with his naked little boy across a scorched landscape to duel 4 saint-like masters. Each showdown is a surreal sermon interrogating ego, enlightenment, and spiritual hypocrisy. Off-camera, Jodorowsky acted as writer, director, composer, costume designer, even on-set guru, dosing cast and crew with Zen koans and peyote-laced pep talks. Legend says John Lennon loved a 16mm print so much he urged Apple manager Alan Klein to fund a U.S. release. Thus, the term midnight movie was born when El Toppo burst onto New York screens at 11:59 p.m. Box office figures? Practically tumbleweeds. But influence? Cosmic. David Lynch cites it as a roadmap for mood, while Tarantino mined its spaghetti Eastern brutality. Cinematographer Rafael Corchidi bathed the frame in blister-white sunlight, then punctured it with obsidian shadows, forging images that feel half comic book, half religious painting. And the score, cathedral organs dueling mariachi trumpets, still resounds in vinyl collections worldwide. Strap in. If Jesus, the Marlboro Man, and Salvador Dali shared a fever dream, this would be the aftertaste. Pink Flamingos, 1972. Hide your pearls, because John Waters' riot of bad taste remains the filth standard. Divine, drag legend, force of nature, plays Babs Johnson, a trailer park queen defending her title of filthiest person alive against the equally depraved Marbles couple. Shot guerrilla style on 16mm for a shoestring $10,000 across Baltimore alleys, Waters assembled a family of misfits. Mink Stoll licking furniture, Edith Massey squawking from a playpen, and Cookie Mueller selling black market babies. Behind the scenes, catering consisted of cheap beer and peanut butter sandwiches. Money saved went to outrageous props, including a talking anus puppet. Police raided early screenings, and distributors refused to advertise scenes we still can't mention before dinner. Yet word of mouth exploded, and lines circled New York's Elgin Theater at midnight, where audiences gagged and cheered in equal measure. Decades later, film historians hail it as a punk declaration of queer autonomy and outsider joy. Need a stat? Waters once bragged that Pink Flamingos cost less than the average Hollywood catering budget for a single day, and has grossed millions in midnight receipts and reissues. You'll laugh, you'll scream, you'll maybe lose your lunch, but you'll finally understand that trash can be glorious art. The Rocky Horror Picture Show, 1975. Let's do the time warp, again, and dissect why this glitter-drenched Frankenstein spoof defied its own flop status. Adapted from Richard O'Brien's stage geek opera, the $1.4 million Fox production opened to yawns until fans in fishnets resurrected it at the Waverly Theater. Tim Curry's Frankenfurter, equal parts Mick Jagger and Cruella de Vil, struts through candy-colored sets built from leftover Hammer horror props. The soundtrack? Recorded at Abbey Road with glam muscle from guitarist Chris Spedding. Behind the scenes, director Jim Sharman encouraged improv. Susan Sarandon caught pneumonia prancing in her underwear on a damp soundstage, yet soldiered on. Box office to date, over $225 million, making it the longest continuous theatrical run in history. Midnight culture transformed the film itself. Audiences invented callbacks, rice throwing, and an entire secondary script shouted at the screen. Few films morphed from celluloid into communal ritual, but Rocky Horror achieved cinematic immortality by handing creative control to its devotees. If you've never done the toast toss, trust me, it's interactive cinema at its crunchiest. Eraserhead, 1977. David Lynch's debut is less a movie than a night-long panic attack. Henry Spencer, sporting gravity-defying hair sculpted with glue and Vaseline, shepherds his shrieking mutant infant through an industrial purgatory of hissing pipes and radiator-dwelling chanteuses. Lynch spent 5 years in abandoned stables on the AFI campus, funding shoots with paper route income and Catherine Coulson's waitressing tips. Cinematographer Frederick Elms created Lynch's trademark infinite darkness by draping black velvet inches from actors' faces, while sound designer Alan Splett recorded malfunctioning radiators to craft the droning score. The Baby, a grotesque puppet rumored to contain a skinned calf fetus, remains Hollywood's best-kept secret. Lynch still refuses to reveal its mechanics. Initial audiences fled in terror, but Stanley Kubrick screened it for the cast of The Shining as homework. Lynch recouped costs via midnight engagements, where art school students turned silent dread into weekend ritual. Want to influence stats? Eraserhead appears on the bedside tables of Trent Reznor and the Wachowskis, encoded into decades of nightmare aesthetics. The Holy Mountain, 1973. Jodorowsky returns, armed with $1 million of Beatles money and a suitcase of mescaline, to ascend metaphysical Everest. A nameless thief mirroring Christ joins 7 planetary elites, each representing a modern vice, to storm the titular peak and dethrone immortal gods. Production was an alchemical rite. Cast endured real LSD soul cleansings. To film a scene with hundreds of frogs in military uniforms, special effects wranglers literally built a frog city. The director shaved his head, carried a live vulture on set for inspiration, and kept a troupe of tarot readers as creative advisors. The Mexican government briefly halted filming over blasphemy concerns. Nevertheless, it premiered at Cannes, stunning critics into euphoric confusion. Box office? A short slump until midnight. Crowds adopted it as the cinematic book of Revelations. Kanye West begged Jodorowsky to collaborate on an album cover. Beyoncé graced Halloween as the rainbow-veiled high priestess. If El Topo loaded the cannon, the Holy Mountain fired it into the stratosphere, where it's been orbiting as psychedelic scripture ever since. Phantom of the Paradise, 1974. Brian De Palma fused Faust, Phantom of the Opera, and glam rock, then sprinkled it with corporate satire sharper than a broken record needle. Paul Williams, yes, the soft-voiced songwriter behind Rainbow Connection, plays Swan, a Mephistophelian producer harvesting souls for pop profits. Budgeted at $1.3 million, production designers painted cardboard sets with ultraviolet varnish to stretch dollars into Technicolor grandeur. Williams composed every track, bouncing from doo-wop to proto-punk to torch song blues, using early synthesizers that predated The Wall. Theatrical release bombed, except in Winnipeg, where devoted fans kept it on marquees for 234 straight weeks. Box office analysts still cite Winnipeg as the single greatest per capita cult phenomenon. De Palma's split-screen massacre sequence pioneered the binocular technique he'd perfect in Carrie. Today, musicians like Daft Punk call it gospel. You'll spot the film's chrome owl masks stalking modern EDM festivals. If showbiz is a meat grinder, Phantom slices the sausage with glitter and a devilish grin. Houseu, nitten Seitzman Kimenta Seitzman, a kaleidoscopic haunted house ride dreamed up by director Nobuhiko Obayashi's 11-year-old daughter. Houseu turns every domestic comfort into candy-coated terror. 7 schoolgirls, gorgeous, kung fu, prof, melody, mac, fantasy, and sweet, vacation at a country aunt's mansion where pianos bite, tatami mats bleed, and severed heads chomp rear ends in midair. Toho financed the picture, hoping for a Jaws copycat. Instead, Obayashi layered matte-painted backdrops, split-second freeze frames, and hand-drawn animation atop live action, crafting a film that feels like Looney Tunes invaded by Sadako. The crew eschewed optical printers, using in-camera tricks and colored gels to stretch their modest 130 million yen budget. Japanese critics were baffled, but teens lined Tokyo theaters, giggling and shrieking at once. When Criterion resurrected it in 2009, Western cinephiles hailed it as the missing link between Scooby-Doo and Dario Argento. Director Edgar Wright keeps a 35mm print for private raves. Bottom line, Houseu is proof your inner child might also be your inner demon. The Wicker Man, 1973. Sing a pagan hymn for Sergeant Howie, the devout Scottish copper who ferries to Summer Isle seeking a missing girl, and finds maypoles, fertility dances, and Christopher Lee in thistledown hair preaching sun god sermons. Director Robin Hardy shot on location in chillingly bright daylight, capturing springtime innocence to cloak inevitable horror. Production designer Seamus Flannery built the 40-foot wicker effigy with real wicker and metal skeletons, then torched it in a single take. Studio executives panicked, slicing the film from 102 to 88 minutes for a double bill with Don't Look Now. Those vanquished negatives? Rumored to pave a motorway under the M4, but fragments resurfaced through dogged fan archaeology, culminating in 2013's Final Cut. Initially ignored at the box office, The Wicker Man grew into Britain's folk horror cornerstone, inspiring bands from Iron Maiden to Radiohead. Today, pagan festivals worldwide host annual burnings in tribute, and the final "Oh God, oh Jesus Christ" scream still echoes across midnight screens. A Boy and His Dog, 1975. Talk about nuclear family values twisted on their head. Don Johnson's horny scavenger Vic roams a post-apocalyptic wasteland, guided by blood, a telepathic mutt with a sardonic wit. Director L.Q. Jones adapted Harlan Ellison's novella for $400,000, filming in Barstow's blasted deserts and seasoning rubble with discarded aerospace equipment. Blood's voice actor Tim McIntyre recorded lines in an isolation booth to sync with the dog's on-set eye lines, pre-digital wizardry. The film's controversial ending, a cannibalistic joke at a female character's expense, polarized critics. Pauline Kael loved its nihilism, while feminists protested. Midnight crowds, however, hooted with punk rock glee, crowning it the feel-bad future we deserve. Variety named it 1975's Best Independent Gross Per Theater Champion. George Miller credits it as the tonal blueprint for Mad Max, while its telepathic banter prefigures everything from Futurama's talking animals to Fallout's wasteland snark. Don't bring a date who can't handle dark humor. You'll leave debating whether humanity's best friend might actually be smarter than humanity. Susperia, 1777. Dario Argento's Giallo Apex bathes a German ballet academy in lurid reds, blues, and greens so intense they stain your retinas. Jessica Harper's wide-eyed Susie navigates peacock-colored corridors while witches carve students like artful mannequins. Cinematographer Luciano Tovoli achieved fairy tale saturation by shooting on anamorphic Technovision stock, then printing imbibition dye transfers, an extinct process last used by Disney. Goblin's prog rock score, recorded with beating heart samples and whispered incantations, blared through theaters at 120 decibels, rattling seat springs. Italian censors trimmed eye gouges. U.S. distributors hacked 12 minutes, renaming scenes with bloodless euphemisms. Yet grindhouse audiences devoured bootleg 35mm prints, chanting "Witch" before screenings. Today, Susperia anchors film school color theory lectures and luxury fashion shoots. Tom York cited it scoring the 2018 remake. If crimson is your comfort color, step right in. Just mind the razor wire in the attic. Dawn of the Dead, 1978. George A. Romero levitates his zombie mythology to socio-political satire by trapping survivors in Monroeville Mall, America's cathedral of consumption. Shot on a $1.5 million budget financed by Italian horror maestro Dario Argento, the crew filmed overnight to avoid interrupting shoppers, rebooting every morning before Muzak resumed. Tom Savini's groundbreaking makeup introduced exploding squibs and gelatin intestines, inspiring an entire FX industry. Argento sliced a 119-minute Eurocut drenched in Goblin score, while Romero's 127-minute U.S. version leaned heavier on character beats. Fans duel over supremacy. Box office soared past $55 million worldwide, a staggering return. Critics wrestled with the gore, yet praised its brains-munching consumerism critique. Roger Ebert called it one of the best horror films ever made. Modern zombie fare, from Shaun of the Dead to The Walking Dead, owes its shambling DNA to this fluorescent shopping mall nightmare. The Warriors, 1979. Warriors, Come out to play A! When gang truce talks explode in assassination, Coney Island's warriors trek 27 subway miles through hostile turf to prove innocence. Director Walter Hill drew inspiration from Xenophon's Anabasis, sculpting New York's 1970s grit into neon mythology. Costume designer Bobby Mannix outfitted each gang, baseball furies, hi-hats, electric eliminators, in outlandish uniforms for just $50,000 total, foreshadowing modern cosplay culture. Early screenings saw real street gangs tussle in theater aisles, forcing Paramount to pull ads. Ironically, controversy tripled ticket sales, netting $22 million domestic on a $4 million budget. Joe Walsh's In the City became the unofficial rooftop anthem, and Rockstar Games adapted the story into a beloved 2005 video game, cementing the Warriors' legacy for new generations who still clink empty bottles and chant. Zardoz, 1774. Behold Sean Connery's immortal thigh-high boots and red bandolier patrolling a dystopian Irish plain decreed by a gigantic floating stone head that bellows, "The gun is good, the penis is evil." Director John Boorman plowed his deliverance clout into a $1.6 million metaphysical carnival tackling mortality, class inequality, and technology's false utopias. Boorman's Wicklow Quarry doubled as apocalyptic wasteland, while cinematographer Jeffrey Unsworth, fresh off Cabaret, smeared Vaseline on filters for psychedelic softness. Critics laughed at Connery's costume, yet philosophers found allegories in vortex crystals and eternally bored elites. Initial grosses stalled around $1 million, but VHS rediscovery turned ridicule into fascination. Today, Zardoz screens at academic conferences on sci-fi ethics, and Connery cosplayers haunt Comic-Cons, plastic revolvers raised in ironic reverence. If ever a film proved that bold failure can eclipse safe success, this floating stone sermon is it. The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1976. David Bowie's porcelain alien aura finds its perfect vessel in Nicholas Roeg's tale of Thomas Jerome Newton, an extraterrestrial entrepreneur seeking water for his dying planet. Roeg's nonlinear editing fractures time like cracked glass, while cinematographer Anthony Richmond's bleach bypass processing bleeds desert landscapes into moonscape abstraction. Behind the scenes, Bowie slept a rumored 3 hours nightly, subsisting on milk, peppers, and Farrah Fawcett magazines. He later described the shoot as a real space oddity. Budgeted at $1.5 million, the film grossed modestly, but earned critical praise for its adult approach to science fiction. Themes of corporate greed and immigrant isolation resonate louder in the 21st century. Watch Newton's advanced tech hijacked by Wall Street suits and wince with recognition. Ripples extend to everything from Under the Skin to Radiohead's OK Computer. Newton may fall, but Bowie, glowing in orange contact lenses, remains forever skybound. Mad Max, 1779. Before thunderous sequels and Furiosa's war rig, George Miller announced himself with a lean pursuit film shot on Australia's backroads for $350,000 Australian dollars. Newly minted Mel Gibson, cast because his battered face after a bar brawl fit post-apocalyptic chic, barely spoke 300 words of dialogue. Stunt coordinator Grant Page choreographed real crashes at 90 miles per hour on closed highways, while med student Miller doubled as on-set doctor, stitching wounds between takes. The film smashed the Guinness World Record for highest profit-to-cost ratio, grossing over 100 million Australian dollars globally, and injected hard R ferocity into action cinema. Hollywood took notes, birthing franchises from Terminator to Fast and Furious. Start your engines. Mad Max is proof that raw velocity and DIY grit can reverberate louder than any studio explosion budget. The Devils, 1971. Ken Russell's Baroque shocker recounts 17th century priest Urbain Grandier's downfall amid mass hysteria in Loudun. Oliver Reed swaggers with sinful magnetism, while Vanessa Redgrave's hunchbacked sister Jean nurses carnal visions. Production designer Derek Jarman erected a colossal modernist set inside Pinewood Studios, then gleefully raised it for the fiery climax, gobbling 40% of the £2 million budget. Warner Brothers recoiled, hacking the infamous Rape of Christ sequence. The uncut negative moldered in vaults until 2017's partial restoration fanned fresh controversy. Despite savage reviews, scholars champion its indictment of political theocracy and mass manipulation. Guillermo del Toro calls it one of cinema's bravest acts of blasphemy. Midnight screenings feel like clandestine rituals. Viewers emerge blinking as if they'd just survived a fevered sermon scorched by hellfire and silver leaf. Still buzzing from that celluloid safari? Drop your own midnight recommendations in the comments, slap that like, and hammer the bell so you never miss our next dive into forgotten cinematic gold. Movieverse is your passport to the weird, the wild, and the wondrous. Subscribe now and keep the projector rattling till sunrise.